708 on CJAD. Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, presented by Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with my co-host Josh Miller of Fuller Landau. How are you, Josh?
Excellent, as always, Dan.
Great, and this evening we're talking to Dan Anber of Xnfinancial. Dan, welcome to today's Entrepreneur.
Thank you. Good evening.
So we start by sort of telling the audience generally what your business is about. So shall we begin there?
I think so, and I think just before we get to that, Dan, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that come from either second, third generation families, and there's entrepreneurs that are just born with it and just start and get a great idea and go. Today's story is like that, but a little bit different because Dan Anber, and I know we'll mix between the two Dans here. The voices are different though. The Dan Anber of Xnfinancial really came from a big business background, but had that entrepreneurial spirit and that entrepreneurial mind that, of course, he took to his own accord. So I think that dynamic that's a little bit different tonight is actually very interesting. But you're right, Dan. Let's start with Xnfinancial and what does Xn do today? What makes it unique? What service does it offer?
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Well, our company is very unique in it provides a specialized service in the insurance sector for people who live outside of their home country. So this would be traveling senior executives of large multinational corporations who are assigned abroad and may have wife and kids or husband and kids that are brought abroad with them, or they may stay behind. And they have a unique set of insurance needs to protect risks involved in traveling abroad. And so that's what our company does. It's a very niche segment in the insurance business, and very proud to have come from Montreal and created this international business. So I think it's relevant to your listeners that entrepreneurs do go global from Montreal.
No, absolutely. We hear it week in and week out. Now, when you started in this business quite a number of years ago, but XN only started a lot more recently. Where did your background come out to help you start this business?
Well, I worked for 20 years for a large U.S.-based insurance company, the Chubb Corporation, and feel very privileged to have been part of that group since it gave me an opportunity to be myself an expatriate assigned abroad on 6 different assignments in 4 different countries. So working through the executive ranks of the company, I had opportunities to work in the U.S., in England, in France, and rotated pretty much through that network. That experience in itself created the opportunity of Xnfinancial, whereas human resource department managers and staff are not always very well equipped to transfer people abroad. So they typically are good transferring within the domestic environment, but the international aspects of an assignment are very difficult for them to manage. As I witnessed in traveling and trying to secure and procure financial services while I'm abroad, advice, and various risks that involve me being abroad.
So was Chubb getting into this field already? Was this something they were already offering, or is this something that came about as a result of?
Well, it all came down. I was country manager for Chubb in France from 96 to 2000, and there was a large multinational client that came to us who really had specific needs that were not being met and challenged us. A risk manager from the large corporation challenged us to solve this problem of 8,000 international assignees. It was an oil field services company with 8,000 expats, probably one of the largest populations in the world, and really want a coordinated service that provided direct access to those clients through a one-stop shop approach. And at the time, we responded and got the mandate and built an infrastructure while I was in Paris, based in Paris.
Still under the Chubb umbrella.
Absolutely. But the issue with Chubb and many large multinational corporations are not nimble enough to respond to clients' needs. So the solution that evolved was really parsed in a way where they really had an appetite for maybe certain lines of business, but not other risks, and really did not become the viable solution for this business model. Certainly, that was the genesis of maybe there's a better way to solve this issue.
Now, did you have the support of Chubb? I mean, they came to Chubb because it was a well-known insurance company. How did you take that issue? Like, how did you take that need, that service, that this multinational's client, and say, okay, how do we service it if that product or service doesn't exist today?
Right. Well, it was really, that's where the creative aspect and the entrepreneurial aspect came in, where what we did is try to look at the client and provide client-centric solutions, which means a one-stop shop that would respond. So let's take an example. If you're moving from Montreal to Brussels on assignment with a large Canadian multinational, the first thing you're going to want to know is, how's my health care going to be covered when I'm abroad? And my life, my disability. So these are solutions that Chubb could not bring to the table. There's moving insurance. I've got to move my goods. I've got to store certain goods here, in storage for long-term storage. I need renters or homeowners insurance when I'm abroad. I need political risk coverage in the event that I go into a hot zone, I'll call it, when we have plenty of those evolving today with everything that's happening around the world. So these were all different lines of coverage and different risk exposures that had to be dealt with. And Chubb's a great company, but it didn't have the appetite for the broad scope of services.
And I think that's a great lesson to learn, and I'm sure you lived it firsthand, is how do you get this unique service package, be nimble, but operate within Chubb? And when we come back from the break, we'll see how it didn't necessarily continue through that large organization, and Dan was able to take it out on his own.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJD with our guest Dan Anber of Xnfinancial. It's 7:19 on today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people, Dan Delmar and Josh Miller, along with Dan Anber of Xnfinancial. And Dan was talking about his business, which is a really interesting story to me, because it's an example of someone working for an employer, in this case a large corporation, and finding a niche that corporation did not want to go to. So maybe they didn't listen to Dan, and maybe they didn't want to go there. So Dan went there. And tell us a bit about that exploration and breaking away from the behemoth to do your own thing.
Well, that's a very interesting point you raise, simply because many large corporations are not really entrepreneurial friendly, I'll call it. Many of them feel like they can entertain an entrepreneur and kind of accompany them with a career path. But there comes a time, and my time was 20 years into my career, where I really thought we had a brilliant idea, and the corporation really just said, listen, this is nice, but they have an $8 billion business to run, and it just wasn't on their radar. So a big decision had to be made to take upon this and develop a business plan. And fortunately, with all entrepreneurs, you got to be surrounded with good people. And a founding partner of mine, a gentleman by the name of Ron Rashevsky in Florida, was the one who really said, hey, this is a great idea. Let's get some seed capital and try and fund this and test the concept, which is exactly what we did.
So you're now out of Chubb, and I'm sure it's a much longer story than that. But let's move forward. You're out of Chubb. You have this idea. How formal do you get with your business plan? I mean, if you're talking about looking for seed capital, because we're talking an insurance business, there must be quite a large sum of dollars that you need to get off the ground. How formal were you in your business plan and approaching investors?
Well, in our case, we were pretty formal. You're right. There was a relatively significant capital outlay for the seed to get the concept worked through, and we needed KPMG's help at the time to formulate a business plan, which they did out of here in Montreal. And once that plan got validated, we went through an accredited investor option, which it's kind of friends and family, but wealthy friends and family, so to speak. And that's really where my partner became an essential backer to the vision and the strategy.
Did he have any insurance knowledge? Or
he had been a trading partner of mine for a very long time. So we knew each other, and we built that business when I was at Chubb. So he came in and really facilitated the raising of the capital through his network, which was primarily based in Florida and London, actually. He had a lot of contacts with Lloyd's of London. He'd been trading with Lloyd's of London for 20 years. So we ended up going and doing a road show and raising the seed capital needed to get the business going. This was back in 2001.
So, and when, I guess, were you complementary? You and your partner, were you complementary, or did you overlap a lot?
No, we were very complementary. I think that was the strength of the deal. I had the vision and the wherewithal to execute, and he had the belief and access to the capital that was required to do it. So that capital, clearly, as you start a business venture, and you can imagine insurance is relatively sophisticated. There's technology and infrastructure that was required to develop, which was the heavy investment up front. And once that concept was validated, we went for a second round of financing to the same accredited investors, and then brought in others to complement once there was a proof of concept. And from that point on, the company never had debt, and burned a lot of capital in the first 4 or 5 years to build the infrastructure. So that was really key, is the patience of the investor and understanding that this was a long haul. It wasn't something that was going to turn around in the next quarter.
What kind of regulatory hurdles were in his way, and how do you set up an insurance company out of scratch? Really, we'll get to that on today's Entrepreneur with Dan Anber of Xnfinancial. 7:25 on today's Entrepreneur. Our guest is Dan Anber of Xnfinancial, and we're talking about Dan's story. He started a specialized insurance business, and Dan, you must have, when you're in this particular field, you must have faced some very interesting, very daunting regulatory challenges in terms of running this type of business in Canada and the States too, I'm assuming.
Yes, you can imagine that today we probably insure about 60,000 families worldwide in over 120 countries. So the key to the hurdle of regulatory compliance was Lloyd's of London. Lloyd's, I'd been exposed to Lloyd's in during my tenure in London with Chubb. And it's a very unique operation. It's not an insurance company. It's actually a marketplace that allows you to take their financial capacity and their licenses in over 100 countries around the world and actually execute your insurance strategies. So Lloyd's of London was essential to overcoming all of those hurdles, because clearly as a startup company, we couldn't have had enough capital, let alone will, to overcome those hurdles. So unfortunately, we went to London and got everything we needed as a startup, which was unusual, but the credibility and reputation of the two founding partners kind of carried the day there. So that was really the key.
Now, when you're starting off this new business, and today it's great, you have 60,000 families that you're insuring, day one, I mean, how do people know you exist? You're no longer with this monster global company. You're now on your own. How do you get the word out there?
Well, that was one of the things. You've got to be a little naive to take a step like that, and I say it in a kind way. But
so you got to be friggin' nuts. Is
you
that
got
what
to
you're
be
saying?
nuts.
Okay.
But the reality is I had a real strong belief in what I was doing, and realized it was clearly an underserviced niche that needed a lot of attention. And I personally had sustained some of the lack of attention and skill sets that existed to solve those problems. So it became very apparent to me that let's go. And then you realize, okay, you're a startup, your clients are large multinational corporations. So if you think about all the bureaucracy associated with them making a decision to purchase insurance, it takes years. So we realized very quickly that the sales cycle became much longer than we anticipated.
Longer than your original business plan?
Absolutely. The one thing that I learned about not being an entrepreneur is always takes longer than you think. And the reality was, in year one, they'd go, this is very interesting, because we were really cutting edge, bringing technology to deliver this at a time when insurance and the web were not really compatible. And they really loved the service, but didn't know if we were going to be there next year. So they say, you know what, why don't you call me next year? Because they were very fascinated with it, just to see if we had the staying power. And this took place for 2 years, and there, we planted a lot of seeds and really got a lot of attention and mobilized different marketing and advertising campaigns. But the key turning point for us was subsequent to leaving Chubb, the largest client in the expatriate field in the world. It's a company called Schlumberger. It's an oil field services company. It's a global company based out of Paris. The program fell apart at Chubb. They just couldn't deal with it. So the client sought us out and said, listen, you want to take this over? And that was it. So it's a little bit like...
This was early on after you...
It was probably, we incorporated in April 2001, and by December 2001, the client had triggered.
Today's Entrepreneur with Dan Anber, our guest of Xnfinancial. We're going to break for news, and after that, an encouraging story, an uplifting story about why Dan chose Montreal to base his business. That's on the way on today's Entrepreneur. 7:34 on CJD. Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. Dan Delmar and Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you Monday nights here at 7 on CJD. And our guest this evening is Dan Anber of Xnfinancial, a specialty insurance company. And very interesting that Dan chose Montreal to base his business. Dan, what among the cities you were considering, why did you end up coming to Montreal?
Well, it's an interesting question because just to show you a little bit of the footprint of the company, the corporation was a Delaware holding company based in Delaware with a Boca Raton, Florida headquarter. Our chairman at the time resided there, so there was an affinity in the investor group. Many of them were from Florida. But the strategy really was to use Montreal as a back office for all global support, centralizing all of the technology, the document issuance, everything having to do with servicing that client base around the world. We chose Montreal. Montreal offers a very multicultural environment, fluency in many languages. And, today in Montreal, we have 15 different nationalities in our staff. We're a little bit like the UN in that respect. But we also benefited from R&D tax credits when we developed the technology, which were the Government of Quebec sponsored programs, as well as we were designated an international financial center in Quebec. This was a program that was put together back in the Liberal government days in the mid 70s, and it was designed to attract foreign entities that transacted internationally. So if 75% of your business or more was international in nature, you would qualify under this program, and it gave us huge corporate and individual tax breaks. So we accumulated the back office and service support and technology development here. We do have offices in Toronto. We have offices in London, England, and we also have a company in Bermuda that actually assumes a reinsurance risk.
Did that help you recruit better talent?
Well, I think it allowed us to recruit more appropriate talent. I mean, if you're dealing with individuals in over 120 countries, there's a certain element of multinational capabilities and understanding that becomes very relevant. And Montreal offered that talent pool, and we did a lot of recruiting on campus, particularly with Concordia. We always had intern programs, and a lot of them would stay on. But more importantly, there was a base here. I was heading Eastern Canada and knew all of the Canadian distributors and many of the old employees that worked for me that I'm very fortunate to have joined me in this vision to move forward, which was really a leap of faith on their part. And to this date, they're still with me. So that was an important
Is that a credit like to your management style? Like, are you more inclusive? Like, what's worked for you in getting the people to really rally around you and give you their best?
Well, I did have a track record. A lot of folks that knew me had followed my international career. But more importantly, I think it's really to be true to yourself. Not sure if I'm the best at dealing with people, but I am who I am, and I think it comes out very, very openly and honestly. I'm very transparent, and I think people appreciate that. And what we tried to do is squash politics at all costs. And many of the folks that have joined XN left public company environments specifically because they didn't want to deal with that. So as we grew the senior management team, we made it a mission not to incorporate politics in the company. And the larger you get, though, the more difficult it gets.
Absolutely.
But
harder.
we still maintain that mandate, and we're more or less successful in that area.
As you bring in people from international backgrounds and large companies and smaller, what was your secret? How did you deal with making sure the culture of XN remained the culture of XN because as people come in from all different environments, large companies, smaller companies, or no experience, how did you create and maintain that similar culture that helped push all forward in the same direction?
Well, I believe it just has to do with surrounding yourself with people who have the same beliefs. And what's interesting is I can go back in time and see there were many people that didn't fit the culture and that were actually expelled from the company. It just happens, not because of my doing, but just seriously, if there wasn't a fit of dignity and respect and really working very hard. But people are important in our business. People are important in our company. I think large corporations are losing that. They're becoming very financial oriented. What have you done for me lately? What's happening in the next quarter, in the next month? And they're going to toss people off and bring them on. And we just believe that you get the right people and the right surrounding, develop the right culture. It creates retention. It creates a working environment that is flexible and conducive to executing results.
Now, another human resources is an important aspect. You mentioned earlier there's a technology component that's also hugely important. I would imagine as you're dealing with 60,000 families throughout the world, staying in touch with everybody and people being on the same page and having all the same services, technology has to play a huge role. How does technology change and advancement over the years helped you?
Well, in there again is a Montreal story. In 1996, I was an advisory board member for a company called Mask Internet that had been created, again, using government programs to develop corporate websites at the time when the web was just starting. And as a result, the company oriented itself into developing rating engines, quoting engines for the insurance industry, and issuance of policy documents, being contracts of insurance, and was well ahead of the curve. So what we did is in 2001, when we got to founding capital, we bought that company and integrated it into XN Holdings so that it had one client, which was XN. And that became the backdrop for us developing the adapted technology. The beauty of our model is that when you serve a population in over 120 countries, they all want to access via the web the same information through a secure environment, and you can deliver sponsored or voluntary programs to a population anywhere in the world. That was revolutionary in 2001. And actually, it was almost a setback for us because many investors looked at it as saying, you're well ahead of the curve. You're a little too far ahead of the curve here. Your clients aren't ready for this. And we said, well, that's how we're going to be different and differentiate ourselves.
Now, you mentioned earlier on that there were many different investors. It wasn't just yourself and your partner. There were a number of people that contributed to the seed capital. Do you plan for an exit strategy?
Well, we executed our exit strategy in October of 2011. But just to come back to the investor base, there were 42 investors in our company. And a lot of them just wrote checks based on who we were. They saw the credibility and they'd known us. And these were people in the insurance agency or retail brokerage industry who we had dealt with. And via our reputation, they thought it was a great concept. And the money was a lot easier to raise that way because of our credibility, our joint credibility with the founding partner. So that was a very broad investor base. Honestly, I don't recommend it to anyone. It's a real challenge to try and manage.
But you did report to them. I mean, you had a board of directors.
Oh yes, and everyone on the board had skin in the game. These were very successful entrepreneurs themselves, and that's the other lesson learned is surround yourself with people who've been there and done that. and it will heighten your ability to succeed. So I was very fortunate. I consider myself very lucky to have had that gray matter surrounding me during what was obviously some pretty difficult times as you're burning capital and you're saying, is there an end to this? But
which I'm sure the investor is saying, okay, where's the end?
Exactly, and that actually took us into you go 3 to 5 years, and it becomes 5 to 7 years, and then after 7 years, they're going, okay, what's your exit? And that's a very, very valid question. We went and started looking at the valuation of the company. And retained a New York investment banking firm to try and call it peddle the company because the investors had suffered from investor fatigue at that point. They really had to get out. A lot of them were older gentlemen and who really didn't have that time horizon. And then 2008 hit, and it was a financial crisis. So we didn't really know what strains they had in trying to liquidate some of their assets, but it became very clear we had to do something. Fortunately for us, we moved along, and in 2011, a French firm that I knew from my days back in the late 90s in France came up, and they were in the same business we were in. Actually, they were administrators of partners of ours, and they bought the company for cash, and we now have 300,000 families worldwide as a group, and we are their Americas division. They do about €1 billion in top-line revenue.
And all worked out in the end.
Yes, it did.
Dan Anber, Xnfinancial. We'll bring into the conversation Ernie Furt, tax partner with Furt Landau, and we'll talk about taxes, of course, corporate taxes, after the break on today's Entrepreneur. Inspiring stories from outstanding business people, Dan Delmar and Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. On today's Entrepreneur, our guests, Dan Anber of Xnfinancial, and we also welcome tax partner at Fuller Landau, Ernie Furt. Welcome back, Ernie.
Thank you.
So we want to talk corporate taxes, my favorite subject on this program, Josh.
And, there's a lot of people with December year ends. Favorite. Yeah, Dan, you have a lot of favorite topics. Some we can't talk on air. So there's a lot of companies with December year ends. We're November 19th. We're about 6-7 weeks away. There's definitely planning. There's definitely some things that companies and entrepreneurs and owners should think about before, as they come to their year end. And I think, Ernie, you certainly have a few right off the top of your head. So why don't you just come right out with it and give us a few that we should absolutely think about?
Well, on the corporate side, you always have to take a look at what your salary dividend mix is like, and you have to ensure that you take out enough money from the corporation for you to be able to reduce your taxes accordingly in the corporation, and possibly defer personal taxes in that regard as well. You can also decide to take out dividends from the corporation, and you have to basically take a look at what your financial position is right now to see what is good. If you have an investment holding company, this time of the year is a good time of the year to take a look at your capital gains and or capital losses and decide if you want to sell off capital gains in order to trigger a capital dividend account potentially, and also potentially trigger losses against those gains as well.
Now, I think, and we've certainly seen many clients and many entrepreneurs over the year just kind of take money out of their company during the year. Call it what you want, whether they're borrowing it or not. Is that something that they should really look ahead and look what they've done in their past year to mitigate whatever potential negative impact if they don't do something?
You really should look at the corporation picture and what you've taken out. And a lot of entrepreneurs sometimes consider their own companies as a personal bank account, and in reality it's not, and you really have to pay the piper in that regard, and either take out a dividend or take it out as salary, and the government may look at it and hit you with a taxable benefit as an appropriation to shareholder or something of that nature. So you really have to pay attention and close attention to what you pull out of the corporation, and there's other strategies that you can use that are too complex to get into of pulling money out of a corporation, which is a possibility at times.
Now, you had mentioned something about this capital dividend account that I think is an interesting component, and maybe something that can be used to plan for the year end.
A capital dividend account is the tax-free portion of a capital gain. So first of all, you have to have a capital gain, and it's a cumulative account that works for the life of the enterprise. So effectively, if you have a capital dividend account, you can pay that out tax-free to the shareholder. Another interesting thing with that is you could decide to sell off or gift securities to some charitable organization that will accept them, and then you have a capital gain, but that whole capital gain won't be taxable, and as such, that whole gain will become part of your capital dividend account as well. So you can actually take that out, but you have to do special elections, and you have to have special resolutions, and in order for your accountant and lawyer to prepare these, in order for you to pull out that money on a tax-free basis. And don't forget that capital losses will reduce your capital dividend account.
Lots of strategies to consider. When we come back after the break, some more strategic spending.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD, as well as Dan Anber's piece of advice for today's Entrepreneur. That's next. Coming up to 7:56 on CJAD, today's Entrepreneur with guests Dan Anber of Xnfinancial and Ernie Furt, tax partner at Fuller Landau. And Ernie, we're talking corporate taxes.
And I think where we left off was, what should companies consider maybe on strategically spending so they don't lose out on something or gain some tax competitive advantage before the end of the year?
You can always buy capital assets near the end of the year as long as they're in use for the corporation. But one thing that's very interesting and should be considered, especially by corporations who are financial corporations who are going to lose their ability to reclaim their QST starting January 1st, is potentially buying assets that you need, accelerating your purchases, such as purchases of computers and other things. And you can be able to get back that 9.5% QST if you buy it in December and use it in December, as opposed to buying that asset in January, where you will not be able to get it back.
Is there any, I know there are big changes coming out in the GST or QST. Is there anything quickly that other than that, people or shareholders of, say, holding corporations should consider?
Shareholders of holding corporations are also financial corporations. A holding company is a financial corporation. As such, they too can purchase the same type of assets and benefit from recovery of the QST, as opposed to not recovering it when the assets are purchased later.
So it's all about timing, because January 1st, 2013, that's done.
Correct.
Excellent. I think as we certainly as we hear on many shows, it's all about planning ahead and strategically planning ahead. Year-end tax planning is absolutely no different. And as we approach the end of the show, we're going to turn to Dan Anber, and in his many years of experience, both large corporations, in his own entrepreneurial corporation, Dan, what one piece of advice out of the many that you've learned over the years would you give to today's entrepreneur?
Well, it's probably what I refer to as the two P's, I guess. Passion and perseverance. It is absolutely key to success, and a strong belief in yourself and your convictions. If you develop a passion in what you do and your beliefs, and don't let anyone derail you from achieving those dreams, you are going to be confronted day in, day out with negativity, I'll call. And you run into negative people every day. Stay positive and persevere.
I think those are absolutely great lessons to learn. And my takeaway, Dan, today, my takeaway today would be really knowing that you have a great idea. Don't be stifled by the big company around you. Dan Anber was mentioning, the negativity. I would take it even a step further. Don't be stifled by anything around you, not just the negativity, but the surroundings, the environment. If it's not flourished, if it's not working within your own environment, whether you're in a big company or a small one, and you believe in yourself, well, take it out, make something happen of it. That's what entrepreneurs do. They take the best of the people around them, and they're able to ignore the negative or ignore the bad environment around them and make the most of their total global idea and effort and environment. And I think that's what we take away from Dan Anber's real life experience of moving away from a large business and making something his own.
And if your employer is not listening to your creative ideas, maybe you should be an entrepreneur yourself. I think that's an interesting point from tonight. So Dan Anber, thank you very much for this, of Xnfinancial, and Ernie Furt, of course, tax partner at Fuller Landau. Thank you, Ernie.
Thank you.
Thanks
Josh,
for having me.
Pleasure having you guys. Back next week, Monday night at 7 p.m. You can reach Fuller Landau during business hours at 514-875-2865 or visit www.flmontreal.com, 8 o'clock on CJAD 800.